So around a year ago, things couldn't be going better for Oscar Piastri. It was the Dutch Grand Prix and he'd pretty much dominated the whole weekend. He'd taken pole and he led the whole race, and towards the end of the race, Lando Norris had just DNF'd from the race, giving him around a 30-point advantage in the championship. Nothing could be going better for him, really. It looked like he had the World Championship kind of done and he just needed to bring it home. But since then, it's gone massively downhill for him. So first off, the Monza team orders obviously happened where he was told to let Norris through just because he had a bad pit stop. That's just one incident. That doesn't mean you're going to lose a championship. But then came after that the biggest bottle job ever seen probably in Formula 1 championship history, when from the Baku Grand Prix he managed to lose around 103-point advantage to Max Verstappen, and Lando Norris ultimately overcame the 30-point deficit to him to win the championship. Kind of the hallmark of these struggles were kind of low downforce tracks where there's a lot of sliding. Piastri seemed to struggle with them last year, as he did in 2024 and 2023, when in 2024 he was knocked out in Q1 at Mexico, and in 2023 was just slow at these tracks as well. So things from then have not gone well for him, and it ended up costing him a championship, kind of all these mistakes. And these led to tensions with McLaren about kind of the treatment between their drivers, but we'll talk about that a bit more later on in the video. So let's fast forward to this year now. So it's 2026, it's kind of a fresh start for both the drivers. McLaren gave up development a bit early last year on their car to bring a better challenger this year. They've got the Mercedes power unit in the back. Things are looking absolutely perfect for them, and it's gone okay for them. They aren't really fighting for the championship, so to speak. Then kind of maybe fighting for P2 with Ferrari, and they're both a bit too far back in the driver standings to mount a real challenge to the guys at the front. But for Piastri, it hasn't really gone that well for him. He's clearly struggling with these cars because these cars are literally very low downforce. There's a lot of sliding going on compared to the kind of beasts last year, which just had unlimited grip and you could go flat out through any sort of corner really. And particularly in the last 7 or 8 races, he's just been getting completely obliterated by Lando Norris, especially in qualifying, but also race pace. And anyone who kind of paid attention to the traits of Piastri in the last few years could have really seen this coming. But the first few races, it wasn't too evident. Obviously, at Australia, he crashed, which was, again, just a horrible start to the season. In China, he didn't even get going. But then in Japan, the first time he was actually able to compete in a race, he had very good race pace, to be fair. He was about 10 seconds up the road from Norris, and I think he ended up P2 or P3. The results will be on the screen for you now. So it was kind of looking okay for him if he could just get the car to the grid and start the actual race. But you have to remember that Lando Norris has had a lot of unluckiness this year when it comes to kind of the state of his car and mechanical problems. And that Japan weekend, he did not get in as many practice laps as Piastri, which would kind of explain this deficit he had to him. But then since then, Piastri hasn't really shown a race performance to that degree. He obviously, he's kind of been there or thereabouts, but for example at Miami when Norris was fighting for the win, Oscar Piastri was about 20 seconds back. And there's been a few qualifying sessions where Piastri's been closer. The Silverstone sprint weekend, he was quite close in sprint qualifying, but obviously that does come with a caveat that it's a sprint race and that they have not really refined the setup yet. And then the sprint race itself, Norris was a wave up the road. But going back to the rumours of tension between him and the team, it's more between Mark Webber and the team, it seems, who's Oscar Piastri's manager, or might not be anymore, which is another thing we'll get onto later in the video. And this whole tension was kind of embodied in the last race at Hungary, and again shows how things have gone downhill from last year. Piastri managed to get the lead into turn 1 and get ahead, and he's kind of cruising out in front. Well, I say cruising, he's not really, because Norris is right behind him, showing he's got way superior pace. Showing again, Piastri struggles with race pace this year. And obviously the team is trying to be fair to both of them objectively, so they don't tell Piastri to move over, even though Norris is very clearly faster. But eventually they do have to pit Piastri, and once Norris got clean air, he was basically matching Piastri's times on the hard tyres. And then after that, there was obviously the incident with Carlos Sainz, where Carlos Sainz, famously known for not using the mirrors very well, once again doesn't use them and crashes into Piastri. It does make you wonder if they should just remove the mirrors off the Williams, because clearly Sainz doesn't use them to save them some weight. But the team radio from Piastri was very telling. He essentially blamed the team for putting him in that position.
On this time.
Oh, mate. It's telling you don't focus balls to me now.
Where he was vulnerable from the back markers, putting him in a lot of traffic. But what he didn't realise, kind of, in hindsight, is that they had to, because he was just losing so much pace and he was going to just get eaten up by Norris and probably Verstappen and the others behind him as well. Now, obviously, the race ended in a mechanical DNF anyway, so it was all null and void. But it was a good race to show the tensions between Piastri and the team, to actually go on the team radio publicly and actually blame them. And there's been tensions behind the scenes as well. Piastri just doesn't feel like he's being treated fairly, and that all started from last year. Now, in my opinion, they are being treated fairly. The team has to favour the faster driver, and since the end half of last year, that has been Lando Norris. He's faster in qualifying pace and race pace this year, and I just don't think that's going to change. I just think it's the nature of the cars. But an interesting development that I saw probably around last week or a few days ago was that Mark Webber and Oscar Piastri might have split up. Now, one of the weird stalker fans on Twitter, who's actually quite helpful in this case, was looking at who Mark Webb was following, I think, and saw that he unfollowed Piastri and deleted all the photos of them together, as if they're some sort of high school couple that have just broken up. Now, that would be an interesting development, and it might show that maybe Piastri is happy to stay at McLaren, and he's kind of tired of the public statements by Mark Webber. Now, in my opinion, I don't think you would want Mark Webber managing you, because he was the number 2 driver before, so any advice he's going to give you isn't really going to help. And he's probably just scared seeing Oscar Piastri going the same route he did against Sebastian Vettel, where he's essentially just slower than the other guy, and he wants to find him another team where he can thrive on his own. But them splitting up could mean that he's just happy at McLaren. Now, if they were staying together, you would have to think about the potential teams he could leave to go to. Now, obviously, Mark Webber was a Red Bull driver, so the natural answer would be maybe Mark Webber will talk to Red Bull and get Oscar Piastri a drive there. But I don't think that would happen. I think Verstappen will end up staying at Red Bull this year, so I don't think that is a door that's going to open. But an interesting door that could open is Aston Martin. Now, Alonso is waiting to see how these upgrades do on the car after the summer break. They are bringing a new Honda engine, and today it was actually reported it's going to find them 5/10. So it is going to be an interesting competitive proposition for drivers to go to. Obviously, Alonso doesn't have many years left in the sport, so it would make sense for a young driver to maybe head there with promises of championship success soon. Now, Piastri would kind of have it made there because they're not going to get rid of Lance Stroll, so he has kind of an easy teammate to go up against. Even though, to be fair, Lance's race pace is okay, it would be interesting to see actually how close they are together in terms of race pace. And you also have to think about the regulations after next as well, because the Honda is probably going to stick around with them for a long time. And maybe the next generation of cars will suit Piastri again. I think with cars that are a lot higher downforce and higher grip, it would suit him more, but also a car where tyre management is kind of a built-in advantage. And that was why he was so close to Norris last year. Essentially, all of Norris's kind of traits as a driver were nullified. His really good tyre saving, and I believe his feel for the front end, which they actually brought a suspension upgrade to try and help him with. So I think in regulations that suit him, Piastri would probably be amongst the fastest drivers, but I don't think he's very adaptable to cars that don't go exactly with his driving style, like the low downforce cars this year. There's also the question, though, for him and teams looking at him, is does he have the nerve to kind of run a championship campaign for the whole year? Towards the end of last year, it wasn't just the pace that was hurting him, it was mistakes and just pressure. Baku was obviously probably his worst weekend in his whole life. He literally crashed twice, crashed at the start of the race, crashed in qualifying. I guess at least he made Q3, but it was really a horrible showing for him, and it showed that the pressure was clearly getting to him. The Brazil sprint crash, although was kind of partially caused by water being flicked up, probably wouldn't have happened, I don't think, if he didn't have the championship pressure. I think he would have either lifted or gone around it, but he was obviously trying his hardest to stay with the pack, because he could see Lando Norris was ahead, and that point advantage he had was just slipping away. Now, do I personally think he should leave McLaren? I think if he wants to fight for a championship, he has to. I don't think Lando Norris is going to run a championship campaign as bad as the last one if he's in the fight again. I think a lot of things went against him and for Piastri, and I think he would need to be in a very specific kind of team for him to launch a kind of convincing campaign. In terms of what team he should go to, I think the best option for him would probably be Aston Martin. I think at Red Bull, if they keep the kind of design they have on those cars, I don't think it would suit him. At Aston Martin, obviously Adrian Newey is probably going to build a car with a lot of downforce and grip, which will probably suit his style a bit more. But ultimately, it's going to be whichever team is available to him, and both of those options might not be available for 2027, and he might need to end up waiting for 2028 or even later to leave the team if he so wishes to. So that's my thoughts on Piastri leaving McLaren and why I think he needs to. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like and make sure you subscribe, and in a minute some other videos of mine will pop up and you can see if you want to check them out.